everyone. Welcome back to the Practical Theism podcast, where faith and culture collide. And I am really excited for today's episode. I have Rob Kaczmark on here, who is the founder, really kind of executive director, jack of all trades, person kind of the mastermind that started Spirit Juice Studios, which if you've seen any really awesome Catholic media, there's probably some sort of link lately to Spirit Juice. They've been growing in their ability, their reach, really, kind of across America, across the world, with some of the work that they've done with some notable names like Bishop Barron and Father Pontifex. So, Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Josh, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here and looking forward to chatting with you.
Awesome, man. Hey, you know what? It's funny, the story how we kind of first interacted. It was on, I think it was a Catholic filmmakers Facebook group. And I just had a question about a camera that I posed, and you were awesome and gracious enough to jump on and answer all my questions. And then we were just nerding out about a camera. This happened years ago. So it's just kind of interesting how now I'm in this place where I'm doing this, and we've been able to connect with this. So I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on here.
Of course, yeah. No, anytime to learn about cameras, I'm all into that. So.
We were just talking before the podcast started about the plethora of and a wide array of cameras that you have at your disposal. And I remember watching a video that you did one time, Rob, and you were like, you know what? Cameras is kind of like, this job is like one of my things. I think it was an unboxing video. And you were like, this is one of the things that I get to do that I just love nerding out about is camera stuff. And I was like, that's my guy right there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if I could, I'd open up a camera store where I can just have all the stuff there to look at it, play with it.
I love it. Well, hey, why don't you get started? A lot of people see your work, but they don't see the kind of the behind the scenes aspect, all the things that you do behind the scenes. Tell me a bit about how you got started in we'll call it creative media as a whole.
Yeah. So, Spirit Juice started in 2007. I'm 37 right now. So when it started, I was 22, 23. And, I got involved in creative stuff prior to that. I was, it was just kind of like I don't say a natural thing, but like I got involved in ministry stuff when I was in high school. And oftentimes it was just, I never thought I was like creative, although I thought I was pretty good with Legos when I was young. I love, and that's, for sure with that. But it was really like, getting involved in the youth stuff at church and seeing like all like the videos or like the flyers all look just like terrible. And I like go to like the youth ministry, like, hey, can someone like do a better job? Like, I want to get my friends here, but like this flyer, it looks like garbage. And like every time their response was, well, why don't you make something up? And I was like, well, I don't know how to do this stuff. And like, this is like, you're talking like 2001 or not even like early, like the 90s. And so like access to like design stuff was like very hard. So I just kind of taught myself stuff here and there, just out of necessity, necessity or, the mother, what is it? The quote, the mother of invention is necessity. Is that what it is?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Whatever that is. But essentially, I just started to become like in the quote unquote like creative just because like I wanted to see stuff that didn't exist. And so, I did that, and that it slowly just kept evolving into more and more stuff. It's like, well, why doesn't someone make a better video like this? And so that there was that and that and that. So eventually got to a spot where people were then asking me to do things, because I was doing it enough that people like took note. And so, years ago, back in 2005, Spirit Juice was a radio show. We were, for a few years, Spirit Juice was, hey, this is Rob Kaczmark, Spirit Juice on Relevant Radio. And we did Catholic music for 30 minutes, one day a week. And I thought, that Spirit Juice's future was in radio. Turns out it wasn't. So that didn't really work out. And we were trying to figure out where to go, and seeing that, the same need of like, man, there's a lot of Catholic organizations that don't have really good media, whether that's primarily video, but also in a few other forms. And so a group wanted to hire me as kind of like their like media person. And I took a step back. I was like, you know what? I want to help you guys, but I think that I need to help the wider church in that. And so in 2007, Spirit Juice Studios started as what it is now, in the sense that we create primarily Catholic video for Catholic organizations. So that's a little history of the company too.
Yeah. So you started in radio. Did you always know you wanted to kind of go the direction of using the skills specifically for evangelization in the church?
I always, so I started to get like into my faith in like early high school, and where I was, taking more seriously. But I think as all high school kids, like I was still like, an idiot. I wasn't like a saint by any means. But I knew it was like the most important thing, and so as I got a little bit older and as I was starting to look for jobs, and really in college, like trying to decide a major, because in college I was even more serious about my faith. And I was teaching CCD, and the director of religious education, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to go for religious studies as my major. And she's like, don't do that. I'm like, why? You have that. She goes, yeah, and it's so hard to get a job. Get a degree in business, and then let your minor or something else be religious studies. And she goes, that'll serve you better. I was like, okay. I mean, I'm going to trust you because, whatever. And so I always knew that I wanted to have my faith involved in what I did. But I didn't particularly know how that was going to happen because, there's just not a lot of jobs in the church in the creative field. Now there is, but like there wasn't that 15 years ago. There's very few.
Yeah. What would you say is kind of like the ultimate goal with Spirit Juice from where you're sitting right now?
I would say twofold. One, that we can that every Catholic organization that is hiring someone for video, it looks good. And so, I mean, certainly we can't. It's impossible to say we're going to have every Catholic organization be our client. But I'd like that to be a strive for that. Like I like to work with as many, because I think we do. Not only do we do a good job with quality, but I think we treat them in the way they should. Because if you work in video or even the creative fields, there's a lot of ego might be one word, but it could be difficult just in general. Like, because essentially you're taking someone has a mission of what they want and they want to communicate it, but they want it done in a creative way. And so you need to lean on a creative to do something fun and creative that's like engaging, but it also has to have your thing. And so it's a bit of like you can be bumping heads at times. And I feel like we found a good mixture to make sure that we're able to communicate their client's vision, but do it in the most creative way that we can. And so, so I think there's a big need for that for any organization, but I feel passionate about serving the church in that way. And then the second goal would be, and this is maybe the 2-3 years old new, but creating really good Catholic entertainment. Because right now there's a lot of good Catholic educational stuff, but there's very little Catholic entertainment, and I think it's needed. I mean, I really want to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. How big is your team now, by the way?
About 20 employees.
20? Okay.
Yeah, 20 employees, and then lots of subs then too.
Lots of subs and stuff. Okay, that's what I was curious about. That's awesome. You mentioned a few pieces about kind of your faith journey sprinkled in here. What would you say are some of the moments, if that you can recall, some of the moments that you felt God kind of pulling you in this direction to use the skills for evangelization? Because you've really taken the JP2, the John Paul II charge to kind of engage the culture and be more active in evangelization, specifically from a creative standpoint. So what were some of those turning moments? I mean, you mentioned some of the things in church. You started taking your faith more seriously. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind? It's like, that was the first thing that was like a seed that was planted or something like that.
I would say the very first seed that I always go back to, I'm like, this was the catalyst of the whole kit and caboodle. It was a short prayer that I got from a nun who was traveling around. She spoke about something. I don't even know what it was. But at the end of it, she's like, oh, here's a little prayer card. And on that prayer card, it said, my Lord, I will try to remember today that nothing is going to happen that you and I can't handle together. Mm-hmm. And that was just like, it was the first thing. I'm like, wait, God's actually like on our side, or like wants to help us. Like, he's like with us, like God with us. It was like the first time I actually like felt that. And so I prayed that every day. And so that was the first, like, okay, if he's with us, and then like, as you're like, well, God's this great, like, I need to like reciprocate that sort of thing. So that was a huge thing for me. And, the story in the Bible, I'm not, as a good Catholic, I'm terrible at quoting Bible verses, So it's the sower of the seeds, though, the one where like, is it the sower
Parable
of the seeds?
Of the sower?
Well, there's that one too. No, it's the one, where
the
guy,
talents.
Yeah, where he like gives them money and like one buries it, one does this, and then like God comes back or the guy comes back, and it's like whoever then I loop into like the Peter Parker, much is given, much is expected or something. But like essentially, like if God gives you a gift or something, and you just bury it and don't do anything with it, then that's not good. Like you need to like grow and expand it, and then God will give you more, and like that's just kind of like how that stuff works. So that was. Here's the thing. I got no background in film. So I did go to school for business. Like I have no training for this. Everything I've can do is just kind of like learn by doing. But recognizing I do have a natural knack for this, right? So like I'm not good at cooking, but I'm good at this. Like, and so I have to honor what God's given me and give it back to him in whatever I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me go kind of to the creative route, everything that you've learned over these years. What do you think is necessary for a budding creative who's getting involved using their creativity for evangelization? What's necessary for them to possess to do that?
Personally, or just kind of on a faith,
I guess just on both sides, it's like, so you obviously had the talent to be able to do it, but then like you were mentioning, you've cultivated kind of a good knack or a good process for how to work with particular clients and parishes. And you've obviously, a lot of your information, a lot of the creativity and the projects you work on have been geared towards evangelization efforts or education efforts. And they've been pretty effective from, I think, just seeing the growth of Spirit Juice, and they resonate with a lot of people. What have you found, I guess, maybe it's how you tell the story, or maybe it's specific things that you draw out in creating these films. What do you think is necessary for somebody who's like, man, that's what I want to do. Spirit Juice has got it. What should they kind of go out and build themselves up on, or train on, or do some internal reflection on to know how to do it well, I guess?
So am I allowed to swear on the podcast?
You know what? If it's natural,
okay. It'll be intentional. So I would say this: if you want to do stuff for your own things, like if there's no client and you're just like, you have a desire to create, let's say works of art for God or for a higher purpose or whatever you want to be, then I would say learn the craft as much as you can. Just find as many people that, now it's so easy because you can just be students of so many people just online without meeting them in person, where in the past you had to like know people physically. So I think a combination of both, learning as much as you can from online, try to study, like be around someone that is just really, in your eyes, really good or better than you, and just soak up, like steal as much information you can. I don't mean steal, like, but just like, it's yours to take. Like, most people are very generous with their knowledge, and so just take it, absorb it, and hold on to it, and try to find your own voice within that. So make as much things as you possibly can, because you don't really find your voice by just watching and being a critic in it. You find your voice by making things and then critiquing your own work. I remember when we were making our first kind of like short film. It was a client, so they were giving us some money, but we had a lot of control over it. And I was like, I don't know if I want my first short film to be this. And I was like getting a little too like filmmaker. And I was like, slap myself in the face, like, get over it. I'm not that, what do you think? I'm just going to be like Quentin Tarantino and like Reservoir Dogs is my first film. And it's just amazing. I think people get stuck in looking at other people or other filmmakers and think that was their first thing. And most of the time, their first things aren't their first things. And it's a different world now. That doesn't exist anymore. You don't just like make your first film and it's a hit feature. People look at Gareth Edwards and they think he was the one that did Rogue One, but before that he did Monsters, and everyone was like, oh, like that for a while. I don't know if people really reference him anymore, but like Monsters was something that he did kind of just like with like a couple friends. It got big. It picked up. It got him to do Godzilla. No, you got to just make a ton of stuff. Make a lot of it. Do a lot of it really badly. Learn from it. So that's if you just want to kind of like make that sort of thing. If you want to do client work, I have one piece of advice, and it's eat shit, because people don't. It's the same. And a lot of creatives hate when I say this, and I've kind of like bumped heads with a lot of them. But it's as simple as this. If someone's paying you to make something for them, they're in charge. That's it.
Yep.
They're in charge. And so like you're there to communicate, hey, I think it'd be better if you do this. But you have to know like you're not, they'll go somewhere else. Bottom line. If the video, like they will stick with you, even if the video is subpar, but they had a good experience, they'll still stick with you. If they had a bad experience and the video is good, very low chance they're going to go back. I mean, the idea is, and what we try to do here is like try to provide both a good video and a good experience.
Yeah.
It's, the reason why most of our clients are repeat clients, but that's what I would say to someone starting off. You got to eat shit. And eating shit means like they want it to look a certain way. And you're like, I don't think that's good. Well, pile it in and just do it,
Yeah.
So anyways, I can go more on that topic.
No, I think you're totally right, man. When it comes to client management, I mean, I've been in client management for a long time, and you're totally right, because at the end of the day, the relationship that you're building, you have to get really good at building relationships if you want to go into it business wise. Like, it goes beyond the creativity. Like, and to be honest, you really need to get good at building relationships regardless, because even if your creative is really good, nobody's going to want to watch it, if they don't really care about you. So how are you going to get your start? No, really, really, really good point. And that's true. It's the same thing, same kind of principle. It's like everything has to, like, you'll watch a good film. It's that age-old principle between video and audio, right? People will watch. You could have the greatest film in the world, but if the audio's shit, then you're done for. But if you have great audio but a subpar video, then people will pay attention. If you have a great story and subpar audio and subpar video, then the story trumps, right? And so, really, really good pieces of advice for all the budding creatives out there. So you've been in, obviously, Catholic evangelization, Catholic media creation for quite some time. In what ways do you think that the church can continue to transform its evangelization efforts through creative media? I think we've seen a sweeping change over even the past 10 years with creatives such as yourself. And really, for a long time, the non-Catholic community was really dominating this space. They did really, really solid work. And I think we're seeing a lot more of the Catholic side come out. I'd love to see it even more domination in that area. What ways do you think that the church can continue to transform the evangelization efforts through creative media?
You know what? The people up top have to bring on the right people and then let go. So, it's the same sort of thing. Really, it was in any organization, right? So how does an organization do something better that they're doing a terrible job now?
Yeah.
It's bringing on the right people and then letting them do their job and not trying to micromanage that. So an example would be the Archdiocese of Detroit, right? So they hired on Edmundo Reyes, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago as the communications director. He was the communications director of the seminary, and he was killing it there. And the bishop recognized that, and they brought him on, and he's doing that. And so I've known Edmundo, and like if you look at the Archdiocese of Detroit, and I'm sure there's a few other dioceses that are doing this too. They're close to us, and I know him, so I can kind of keep a closer eye. They're just killing it when it comes to design and aesthetic, whether it's their videos or images that come out or the emails. It's very cohesive. And I would imagine and I haven't actually asked Edmundo's question, so maybe I'm totally off base, but I would imagine the bishop's like, hey, you are really good at what you're doing. I'm not going to get in the way. Yeah. You keep doing that. Where I think a lot of times what you may see in other dioceses or other organizations is the leadership up top wants to keep their fingerprint on everything, which is just slowing it all down. And so you got to let the people run. I remember NCYC is this big youth event, right? And it's got like 25,000 people. And Declan Ware Productions is the ones that put it all on. And Declan is the guy that, he's like the guy that runs it. I remember like the opportunity I first had to talk to him early on. I was like, Declan, this is like incredible. How do you do this? Because you walk in, I mean, like it's in like the Colt Stadium. So like, Lucas Oil, it's just all, they bring in all the lighting and all the video. And he's like, you hire good people and you let them do their job. He just drives around in the golf. Not just. I mean, I know he's probably got a lot going on, but for the most part, he's driving around in a golf cart, putting out fires and talking to different people. So you gotta let go. If you want to grow, you gotta let go. It's like I don't know if that's a saying or what, but it should be because I think that's what's holding the church back. And the lack of taste. I also think like You look at some of the big players. We'll leave things unnamed, but you look at some of the big players in Catholic media. Not Word on Fire. I just want to be clear. Yeah. Word on Fire is killing it.
They're pretty legit.
Yeah, but some of the other ones, they just don't have good taste. And taste is objective, but at the same time, like, I don't know, some stuff just looks pretty bad.
Yeah. I feel like people can feel it too. Like you kind of like shifting your seat a bit. You're like, I think it could be better. I mean, because we're so used to cinematic quality. Everybody's seen a good movie, so they know they know instinct. While they don't know what depth of field is, they know what depth of field is, right? You don't have to be shooting on a broadcast camera with a 3cc chip to get to know like something's off about this. It looks like a home movie a little bit. I agree. It boils back to like leadership, right? It's always leadership from the top down, making sure that exactly what you're doing is that, I don't know if you're a Jocko Willink fan or Extreme Ownership, you're familiar with his books, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin.
I'm familiar with Jocko. Yeah, I don't know too much of it. I've heard him talk a few times, and it's always cool, but I don't know too much background.
Yeah, they're ex SEALs, Navy SEAls, but now they've taken all the principles that they learned in their tours in Iraq and Ramadi, and they've transposed those to the business world. And so now they go do business leadership consulting. Really, they have two books, one called Extreme Ownership and one called The Dichotomy of Leadership. And in these books, one of the main principles that they push over and over and over again is this idea of decentralized command. And it's basically what you're saying: you put the right people on the right seat on the bus. To use, Gary Collins' language, right? To put the right seat on the bus, and then you decentralize that command. You let them do that. They don't have to come to you to check in and to get your approval on every little thing, which is exhausting, by the way. Yeah. So trusting the people that you put in play to do what they do well, and then letting that ride, and maybe there's tweaks that you got to do, but when you're going in there, you're micromanaging every little thing. First of all, it crimps the creative. You get really good volunteers all of a sudden not want to volunteer anymore, right? It's just the whole thing collapses on itself. But the minute you release that into the wild, I think people would be surprised if we saw more of that,
Yeah, no, that's really good. I could have said it better, and now I want to. Jocko, is that his book then to check out to kind of learn more about that?
Yeah. Check out his first one, Extreme Ownership, and basically the idea is that, like, as a leader, you own everything, but it doesn't mean you do everything, and it doesn't mean you There's all these principles that come into play too, but. Really good. It resonated with me over the past year. And I'm reading his second one, Dichotomy of Leadership, right now, which shows, hey, there's a dichotomy with leadership in a lot of different areas. For example, you can't be too strong, but you can't be too loose, So there's a balance in leadership in all these different areas. So you might get a kick out of it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah. All right, so we're seemingly in a bit of a culture war, big surprise, for some time now, and in a place of religious relativism where people want to scrap religious thought and dialogue from the public square. That's kind of current state of affairs. From your perspective, where are the areas of opportunity for evangelists to engage the culture head on? I know a lot of your work and your material does it. I know we were talking actually just before hopping on here about one of the documentaries you did, Reaching the Unaffiliated. So it seems to you seem to have a bit of a knack and like a tie-in here about how we might do this. Where are some of the areas that you've seen for evangelists to engage the culture head on?
It could feel a little overwhelming, and I think it partly depends on how you're looking at it, right? So, you read headlines and it's like, oh my gosh, like it's just like you just feel like the faith is just shrinking on itself. So I think first taking a step back and not feeling like inaction will cause everything to just decay and fall apart. And so just being confident, like being comfortable and like not feeling there's like a time pressure on any of that stuff. And then just looking, so as you're like calm in it and not in panic mode, because I think once we go in panic mode, it's a culture war and all that stuff. You start to be like, oh my gosh, any opportunity I have to like take advantage of it. Okay, let's just be calm. And you just kind of evaluate like where you're at and who's in your life and who's around you. And I think at first it has to start with your life as an example. So if your life is not an example of what it should be, then just stop what you're doing and don't even talk to anyone until you get that figured out. Yeah. Once you feel like your life, if someone like, everyone's, got an imperfect life, but I mean like if someone spent a couple of days with you, they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, he or she is probably living it. then you're in a good starting point there, okay? And so I think if you're at that spot, if you're not at that spot, then it's really critical to get that right. And really, like, that should be reflected in your loved ones. That should be reflected in your spouse, in your relationship to your parents, your siblings, your kids, friends, and really just dial that in. Okay, so you're good there, and you want to still engage, and you feel like, okay, but I still want to do more. I think it just comes smaller and figuring out what feels, the most authentic to where you're at. So I think some people have a lot of styles based on maybe their past. So, I've noticed, so I feel like, so cradle Catholic, I feel like I've kind of always been in the church. My mom never let me miss Mass. So just being around a lot and seeing different types of people coming in and out of the church. A lot of people I've seen that have had kind of a crazy past, we'll say, have went from one side and then they go way to the other. And so they have no problem being really intense, really in your face. And that does talk to some people, and that's good. But finding your voice and then just being as authentic as you can in that voice. And so, I don't know. In one way, I have no advice, but in another way, it's like there's so many different ways you can do it, and you can do that. Totally. So the documentary you mentioned, reaching out to the unaffiliated. So it came to us from the USCCB, and it was designed. So it's about a 30-minute doc, give or take, and it was designed to speak just to bishops. It wasn't actually meant for public consumption. We were very clear at the beginning, hey, so this is kind of just within, maybe we'll put it out later or something wider, but that's really not our intent. It's to speak to bishops top down to kind of, as that leadership in reaching the 5 kind of principles on how to bring people back to the church. And so, that has a good, if it's about how can you bring people back to the church, looking at the 5 core principles that are, part of the church, or we mentioned it in the documentary, and then just seeing where those fit in, so one of it's beauty, one of it's service. And if you're trying to evangelize to people in your own life, leaning on those and making sure that you're doing that, in your own life, so if you're going to talk about how the church is so all big in service and they serve the poor and they do all this stuff and that's all you're saying, but you don't actually do that yourself, then you might want to start doing that if you're going to be speaking on that. But maybe it's the beauty stuff. So it's a bunch of different things. So I don't know. I didn't really fully answer your question, but I feel like hopefully a starting
There's
point.
There's some answers in there. There's some meat.
There's some meat
that people can gnaw on a little bit and think about. You're calling everybody a sinner pretty much. So which is kind of the reality, right?
Self-included. I just have a big problem with when people are so focused on and whatever their thing is, it doesn't matter. You could insert anything, whether it's the church or whether it's anything, any number of stuff. But they're not things aren't right at home. And I don't mean at home, but just they got to get themselves kind of situated. So I think that's you got to line yourself up with God and making sure that because you're you're asking people to no, you should follow God in the church and all that stuff, but you're not doing it yourself.
You're not doing it.
Get out of here,
Yeah, it speaks to a fundamental dynamic of just how people operate, how humans are. That people, they could smell inauthenticity and lack of genuine nature a mile away. They're not people aren't stupid as much as people want to think oh, hey, people just are kind of dumb sheep. No, actually people are pretty intuitive, and they were designed that way, that by design, so they could kind of look internally and they can self-reflect when they actually do it, and they could do it effectively. God designed everybody a specific way. And so the authentic person, and I think too, to the point that you're saying, it's, you have, living that out and, working on that, but also being okay working on that, right? And telling people hey, I'm struggling in this particular area, being able to cultivate a circle that you're able to be open and honest with, so they know your struggles. Because nobody can shoulder that burden alone, first off. And second of all, it's if you're not able to be authentic with people and you always feel like you have to kind of put this face on and fake it, right? It's no wonder we all kind of struggle from imposter syndrome from time to time, So I think the authenticity is a massive piece, especially when you're talking to somebody about from an evangelistic perspective. You're let's face it, you're attempting to transform somebody's truth foundation and what they believe to be true. And that's a very difficult thing to change and adjust. And so everything you say is going to be dismissed if you're not authentic and you're not genuine in how you present,
Exactly.
Really,
Yep.
really interesting. You've done a lot of work too with obviously people like Bishop Barron, Father Pontifex, for evangelization. And I know Bishop Barron. I'm a big fan of Bishop Barron. I've followed him for a number of years. I was able to meet him actually when he was out doing the prayer. He did a prayer mass at the Archdiocese of LA when he came out here a couple years ago. So I was able to chat with him for a little bit. And I know he's a big advocate for the transcendental of beauty for evangelization, right? Versus the true or the good. He talks about that in the film you referenced, the Reaching the Unaffiliated. And I think that fits right into creatives like ourselves and like yourself, and what they're doing in the evangelization space. So from your perspective, do you think that's the most effective tool? I know Bishop Barron talks a lot about it. Do you see that as the most effective tool in evangelization today? And why do you think it resonates so much with people?
You know what? I don't know if it's the best tool. It very well could be. I think it's a good tool because it brings people, if you're talking about like the transcendental as the best way for evangelization, people always want to know whether they're religious or not, that there's something bigger than themselves. And I think that's what the transcendental shows. And if you're able to articulate that in a creative way, it gives people just a deeper sense. I think it's the reason why, oftentimes people, at least in Western culture, resonate a lot with like the hero types of films or stories, because it's just like, it provides a structure of like, you can be better and bigger than you think you are, for a greater good. And I think that's what the transcendental attempts to do in creative forms. And so, also, I think the unsung hero in evangelization is humor. It's like so untapped. I'm totally serious, because like if you're laughing, you're learning, right? And like, I don't know, like it just, I think about a lot of like things that I reference a lot, and it's often things that are really funny, and it just sticks with you, and it just got, I don't know. So no one's really doing that much. It's a hard thing to do, because it's like, how do you be funny and respectful? Like, you don't want to like, dismiss any of like, especially when it comes to like faith stuff. Like, so it's a fine line, and I get why people kind of steer away from it, but I'd also encourage people to use humor as much as they possibly can if they want to evangelize.
I think finding ways to break through the stereotypes too, right? I think humor kind of fits into that. I think of this too. I'm a big hip hop fan, right? There's a stigma that hip hop shouldn't live within the religious sphere. I just feel like there's this kind of stereotype, even though on the non-Catholic side you see a lot of it, but the Catholic side, we're all traditional, right? We're all, we got to have the right hymns, and we got to have the old antiquated song and dance, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's going to feed somebody in a specific way. But I think there's something to be said about like urban culture or something a bit more contemporary, and the ability to present the faith in a contemporary way, like some of the stuff that you're doing. So I think sometimes attacking those a little bit, obviously being sensitive to the fact that, some people point out, but not all media is going to be for everybody, right? So some people are always going to be turned off by the art that you're creating or the work that you're doing. I
mean, just going on that tip for a second, like broader strokes, the reason why CCM, contemporary Christian music's taken off, or Catholic music's, really the only way a Catholic artist is making a living is if they're also a retreat leader. So they'll play music, but they're leading retreats. I thought about this for a while, especially from like hosting that radio show years ago. It comes down to this. In Protestant churches, it's acceptable to play any type of music for the most part, right? You can be playing guitar, you can be playing the drums. Most of the time you do. I'd imagine it's fine to like, you have someone doing hip hop or whatever it is. Yeah. In the Catholic sphere, it's like if it's not liturgically correct, it's not. It's people have a very strong. Okay, that shouldn't be like, they don't want to hear a guitar at mass. And listen, I'm not trying to get in that debate. I'm just trying to say from an outsider, the reason why there's so much friction in that, why there's not a larger Catholic hip hop scene, because anytime you say you put Catholic in front of whatever genre, people automatically assume that it's liturgical and that you're trying to get Catholic hip hop in mass. Like no one ever said I want Catholic hip hop in mass. I just want hip hop that talks about Catholic stuff. And so, I think Catholics, get very protective of like not having any non-traditional or non-liturgical music enter into mass, which, just causes a lot of dialogue and then thus lack of that type of genre.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a really good point. People automatically associate the two, which is interesting because you have the it's not a recent thing, but it's probably recent within the past 20 years, the kind of like youth mass, right? Where all of a sudden you bring in a lot of that contemporary Christian music, Christian worship music, and it's used for the liturgy. And I'm not, to be clear, everybody listening, I'm not advocating hip hop to be in mass. But
none of us are. Yeah, we're just saying.
You're totally right. Cool, man. Hey, last kind of thing before I want to just jump into a few rapid fire questions just to kind of pick your brain on what are some ways that you see social media being a useful tool for you as a creative media professional to get your message across? What are some of the benefits you've seen?
I think it's a peek into putting for me, like it's a curtain behind what's going on one aspect, so we can see there's real people making stuff. There's real, problems or issues, and, we're all trying to figure this out. So I think that's one element that we lean on with social media to try to help further. And then the other side is just, playing around. Like it's such in the past, like years ago, it's like you make one video and then you kind of put all your eggs in that basket. But like the cool thing about social media is like you can create many different types of, you're working on one project and has different elements that come from it. And like, if you're running campaigns or different stuff, you can cater stuff to different people, which is just really cool. So, you could be more specific. So I think the benefit of social media is you can be so specific in different things and not feel like you need to talk to everyone at all times for for the next 2 years. Like you could just be talking to this group of people for right now. And it allows you to be more personal. Like when it makes social media more social because you're, have that more, feel like more targeted talking to with folks.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. All right, Rob, got a few rapid fire questions for you. So, and you may or may not have these rattled off the top of your head. So be prepared. First thing, favorite film you've shot over the years?
Salve Regina. It was the skateboarding friar.
I remember.
It was I thought it was gonna be a terrible shoot going into it because everything kept falling apart. But it just so many pieces worked out really well.
Yeah, and that one went on to win an award, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it won a regional Emmy, which was it was the first time we ever won that. It was super wild. So yeah. But it was
love it. Favorite camera to use?
That's painful. That's painful. I'll say a C100 Mark II. I still feel like it's the perfect camera. The way the screen articulates forward and back. It's it's built into the body. It's small. It's light. I still think the sensor on that is killer. It's inexpensive, so it's still. I know a couple groups that people love that camera. I think that it's not the best image quality, and there's but C100 Mark II.
Yeah. Okay. Just random question. Do you need 4K in today's production world? Do you produce a lot of stuff in 4K?
The short answer is no. You don't. You don't need, but you do. So it all depends where you're going. If you're doing network stuff, where they're they require that, then sure. But I can't tell you the number of times that I've shot something in 1080 and upres it to 4K. That being said, we shoot most of our stuff in 4K, but most people hey, do you want a 1080 file or 4K? And just give me the 1080, so you definitely don't need it. There's cheats. Really, the biggest cheat of all of it is you can shoot in 1080 and you could still export out of Premiere as 4K, and most people have no difference. I would actually love to see a shootout or a watch out of that.
Love it. All right. Favorite role in production?
Director's an easy one because you kind of call the shots, but I might have to say editor because you really that's where the pieces are coming together. And I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes the editor could have like the most control over something. So maybe editor.
Editor. All right. Favorite style of video to produce?
Anything that has a lot of cuts.
Okay. Like quick cuts?
Quick cuts.
Yeah.
And kind of gimmicky. Like I look back at videos, and there's a lot of one, like I think about, but then like ones that we just like did like weird, funny, goofy stuff. Those ones just really stick with you. So yeah.
Awesome. Favorite Catholic saint?
Oh man. I'm gonna do the easy out and say Saint Joseph.
Okay.
And I know
we're in the year of Saint Joseph right now.
We are in the year of Saint Joseph. I mean, he just was constantly, persistently even, and like there's just like we don't know a lot about him, but the little we know, I think he's just I think as a dad, I wouldn't have said Saint Joseph maybe like 5 years ago, but Saint Joseph right now. Awesome.
And last one, favorite scripture verse?
I would probably say the one we were referencing earlier, which I don't know what that is.
I think it's a parable of the talents, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Everybody, yeah. Awesome. Hey, Rob, this has been awesome hanging with you. Really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Appreciate being on the podcast, man. Where can people find out more about you and more about Spirit Juice?
Yeah, I mean, Google Spirit Juice, Spirit Juice Studios, spiritjuice.org. We kind of try to buy up all the URLs of Spirit Juice or Facebook, Instagram, Spirit Juice Studios, any of that stuff. So you type in Spirit Juice on any sort of thing, and hopefully you'll find the work we do.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for hopping on, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. For everybody listening, wherever you might be listening at, definitely hit that like button and pound that subscribe button like you mean it, so you can continue to get more of this awesome content. Ring that little bell so you get notifications in your inbox. And if you're watching on YouTube, join in the conversation down in the comment section down below. We'd love to hear from you. From all of us here at the Practical Theism Podcast, we'll talk to you soon.